So the plan for today is we're going to go through how to switch to the new layout in the CRM, what that involves, how you roll it out to the rest of your team. We're then going to look through the new navigational options and all the new settings within Zoho. We'll then go through all the new data visualization options. Now, when I say data visualization, I'm just talking about new ways to use the CRM, new ways to interact with your records. And one of them in particular I know is going to be really popular. It's actually, I've switched to using it out of like all the standard views, so I'll go through that as well. We've then got team modules and team requests. These are brand new. This is a whole new concept to the new CRM layout. So we're going to go through that, how you might use that in your CRM and the benefits it provides. We're then going to go through a couple of things around permissions and customizations. You'll see this as we start to go through the new layout. One of the things the redesign has done is made it much easier for customers to be able to customize their CRM. Now, on the one hand, this is great. I love it when people customize their CRM to meet their processes. On the other hand, though, what it means is now if your user permissions haven't been set up correctly, there's going to be a free for all on adding fields, changing settings because it's much easier to do now. So we just want to make sure we're mindful of that and making sure that yes, we are customizing the CRM to make it better for the business, but it's not a free for all of everybody doing what suits them and not thinking about the bigger picture of the system. And then finally, I've sort of included a lightning round slash questions. We'll see how we get on for time. As I say, it's the first time I've done one of these webinars, so I think we've got about an hour here. But if we come in a bit short, I've got some stuff to go through that I think is going to be equally important. And of course, if any questions come through as well, feel free to post them in the Q&A, and I'll make sure I've got that open on my other screen as well. So before we begin, a quick introduction. You can see that's me with slightly more hair before I had a haircut. I'm Jake. I run Limitless IT Consultancy. I have been working in Zoho Consultancy for just over 7 years now. It's been quite a long time. I'm a Zoho certified CRM administrator and a developer. My background is actually I went to university to do software engineering and to write code. So it sets me apart a little bit from some of the other Zoho consultants out there that are more they're more surface level customizations. We can do much deeper customizations, and actually, that's what we do with a lot of our clients to really cater the CRM for them. We currently support clients from about 4 users up to 100 plus, so we work with a range of clients. And I think this is great when we're talking through things today because actually, something that works really well for a 4 user organization will be totally different to something that works well for a 100 plus user organization. So you've got to take the number of people into account as we're going through things. Not only that, the clients we work with love us. That's the real truth of it. This is one client that renewed just over a month ago. I think he's actually in this webinar, so hopefully he will see this. Delighted to renew. You've been an absolute superstar. And all of our clients are like this. And I think this is really what sets us apart. And really why I wanted to do these webinars is we're already helping all of our clients with this information. So I want to make sure we help other people too. This is another client that renewed just recently. In fact, I know Roger's in the webinar because I've noticed his name pop by just a moment ago. Um, Again, happy to renew for another 12 months. We achieved a huge amount with this particular client. And it just goes to show how much you can do within Zoho, but it's knowing how to make the most of it. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. Just before we get into that, though, one last stat about Limitless IT Consultancy. We run mostly on annual plans, so our clients normally sign up to work with us for a year. Now, over the last year, we've had a 90% annual plan renewal rate, and that's actually 13 out of 14 clients have renewed so far this year. So we know we're doing something right because our clients stick by us. And again, this is where really why I wanted to do this webinar is to go through all the other ways we can help your business and some of the things I've learned working with all these different clients because actually it gives you a great perspective working with different clients when you're dealing with Zoho because you see what works well in different industries. Now, that's enough about me, you'll be pleased to hear. Let's get into the Zoho stuff and let's get out of this PowerPoint and into the actual system. So, I'm going to swipe across now into Zoho CRM. Now, most of this probably looks pretty familiar to you. We've got our tab bar along the top. You can see we've got a million options in here because this is our test system and it's not been very well cleaned up. You can see we've got some test records in here. All of the stuff you would kind of expect in a Zoho system. Now, the thing that we're going to click, and I'm sure some of you have seen this already, is try CRM for everybody. Now, when I click this, it's instantly going to change the view of the CRM. Now, depending on if it's the first time you've clicked it, Zoho will pop up with a very, very quick tutorial of just sort of walking you through some of the new features, but you can go right ahead and skip over that because we're going to go through them in far more detail today. Now, if you don't see that banner to switch to the new version, there's a couple of reasons that could be the case. One, Zoho's rolling out CRM to everybody in stages. Rather frustratingly, if I'm honest, it's been kind of hit and miss. Some clients I've noticed have had it for a couple of weeks, some clients have only just got the option. So it tends to be down to individual clients as and when they get that button. The other thing that will determine it is if you're an admin. If you're not an admin and your admin user hasn't allowed you to move to the new version, you also won't see the button. So they're the two key things to be mindful of. Now, if I swipe across into a second user within this test system, this user isn't actually an admin user, but now that I've gone through and I've enabled it for non-admin users, you'll see they also have that button. And I'll just show you if I go back to the presentation how that looks. So once you've moved to the new version of the CRM, if you go down to the bottom left-hand side and hit the little face outline, you can then click to extend CRM access to all users. Now, obviously, I've taken a screenshot of that because I've already done that in our test system, but that's how you would extend it out. Now, obviously, be mindful. You know what every user's like in a system. When they see a button that says new, they normally click it. So I'd be mindful about enabling that option until you've prepared the team, because there are some quite big changes visually to how the system looks and how it behaves. Now that we've switched into the new layout, let's go through some of the options within that layout. So let's start talking about navigating the layout. And this is the exciting bit. This is really where there's loads of stuff to go through. So the first part, and probably the most obvious part, is our sidebar here. So gone are the tabs along the top of the screen, and just to show you in comparison, this is how it looked previously. So we had all of these tabs along the top of the screen. They're now all in this vertically scrolling sidebar. Now, personally, I much prefer this layout. It gives you it's far easier to quickly change tabs. They're far more visible now. You can also click on the arrow at the bottom and you can minimize this bar as well. So if you're working on a smaller screen and you don't have the screen real estate, you can minimize that bar. Now, it is worth pointing out that I am in Zoho CRM here directly. If I was to go into Zoho 1 and then open up the CRM, it would look ever so slightly different because I'm looking at it through Zoho 1. So you can see now if I go into Zoho 1 and I open up the CRM, you can see it looks a little bit different. So if I'm within Zoho 1, you can see I've got this top bar and then a sidebar. Whereas if I'm directly in CRM, you can see I've got two sidebars here. Now, it's completely down to personal preference. Both of these more or less work the same. The only difference is you've got these tabs at the top in the CRM in the Zoho 1 version. Personally, I tend to work directly in CRM. I actually find it tends to be a bit quicker. I find sometimes the Zoho 1 wrapper around CRM can make it a little bit slower. So I always make sure I'm actually on crm.zoho, in my case .eu, but it might be .com for you guys. So you can see that data directly and you're directly within Zoho 1. Now, along the sidebar, the first thing we have is our modules. So this is the same thing that we had along the top in the old system. So I can click through my leads, my contacts, my deals, anything else in the system. You can see there's loads of modules in here. We're going to go through how to clean that up in just a minute. We've also got our reports in here. So previously, this was one of the tabs mixed in with the modules of the CRM. Zoho's now kind of upgraded reports, and in fact, the same for analytics or dashboards as it used to be known. And it's given them their own tab. And again, I find this makes navigating the CRM much easier. And actually, I found myself using reports and analytics in the CRM more since they've made this change of putting them into the sidebar. Because actually, it takes less clicks to get there and it's slightly easier to navigate because you're just jumping between things on your sidebar. There's also some great new reporting features that have been added on analytics features that have been added to the new version of CRM. So we'll go through some of those in a bit as well, because some of those are actually really cool around filtering. The next thing we've got on the main sidebar is My Requests. Now we'll come to this more in a little while because that one is a whole new part of the system. We've then got our Marketplace. So previously this sometimes showed up as a tab, but most of the time you'd access Marketplace through settings. This is where you'll connect extensions, and that can be Zoho apps, it can be Google, Microsoft, or it can be third-party Microsoft extensions, third-party marketplace extensions, sorry, as well. Now, this is where I guess one of my concerns for the new Zoho layout comes. If you've got your users set up that they have access to the marketplace, all of a sudden it's gone from being buried within settings or sort of hidden at the bottom of tabs to a distinct button. So again, I think without a little bit of policing of your users, there's a real risk here that people are just going to be installing add-ons without really thinking about the sort of consequences. So it's something I think needs to be, we need to manage through user permissions to make sure that only the right people are able to do this. And we'll get there a little bit later. I can see a question's come in from Rob as well, just as I've turned my head there. Is there an easy way to switch back? Yes, there is for now. So if I click onto my little face here, I can go up to the top and I can switch back to the old version, and that'll take me entirely back to the old CRM. Now, it's worth noting a lot of the features we're going to talk about today are only available in the new version. So if you switch back, you will lose those new features until you go into the new version again. Now, Zoho hasn't yet committed to a time of when that option is going to be removed, but it will happen. So my sort of take on it is I'm trying to get used to it whilst it's optional before I'm forced into it. But for now, it is optional. So just running through the rest of the sidebar here, we also have our search records. This works exactly the same as it did before. I can search my name and you can see any records that relate to me. All pretty standard. We've then got our quick create button where I can quickly create any type of record in the system. So if I want to quickly create a lead, I can click there. Great, and then we're into creating a lead exactly as you would normally expect. And then finally, we've got our calendar, our emails, signals, and our settings. Um, I'll skip over most of those because they're pretty much the same as what they were in the old system. It's just now you access them from the sidebar. The only thing I will point out for now, until we get into a bit further, is within settings, you now have a vertical scroll bar. Previously, if I go into settings in the old version, you'd have this kind of grid layout. This is the one element I'm really missing of the old UI, if I'm honest. The long scrolling of settings, I think is a downgrade, and I hope they revert to this kind of grid look, because actually, particularly as a Zoho consultant, I spend most of my time in settings and not the main CRM. You have to do a lot of scrolling now, so I'm hoping they make some changes there, but we'll see how we get on. So let's go back from the modules and dig in more detail. So we've got all of our modules on the sidebar here, but you see we've got a couple of settings at the top. So the first thing we can do is organize modules. Now, this is one of my biggest new features of this release, and it's something really simple, folders. We can now create folders to manage all of our modules. So instead of having a never-ending scrolling list, we can create a folder, let's call it sales. I can create that folder, I can drag it around, and then if I drag it to the top, I can then move my modules into those folders. So let's move my leads into sales, my contacts, put that into sales as well. Honestly, you don't know how happy this feature has made me. It just makes navigating the CRM so much nicer. So we'll put all of those into sales, hit move, and hit save. And then straight away, we've got a little collapsible folder that allows us to organize all of our modules. It's such a simple little thing. It's made such a big difference. I mean, we're in a test system here. A lot of these modules have just got nothing in them because it's just our sandbox system. But particularly with some of the larger clients we work with, where we've got really customized CRMs, you end up with a lot of modules and you need access to them all. So you can't just turn those modules off. But there was no way to really effectively organize them. So being able to have folders is such a big win. One of the other things I normally do within the folders is I create an activity folder. If we do that now, so I'm going to go in and create, oh, perhaps if I do that correctly, let's rename that to activity. Oh, got a typo in there. Let's fix that. There we go. So we'll rename that to activity. And those of you that have been using CRM for a while will remember that calls, tasks, and meetings used to all be one module called activities, and they split them out. And for good reason, it's added some features splitting them out, but it's always, I found, made the CRM feel a little bit more disorganized. So again, now being able to just organize them into folders so they're neatly and easily accessible is brilliant. So I'm going to do all of that and then we'll hit save. Again, we've now got our nice easy folders that we can click in and out of. Small thing, huge improvement. The next thing we've got in here is add module. And again, this is where we get into how easy it is to customize this. Again, just directly in the UI, you're able to make some, I guess, configuration settings that previously you would have to go through settings to get to. So again, another thing to be mindful of. We will talk about that button more in a moment. We've also got the Manage Modules button where we can create new org modules, team modules, folders, or associate modules. We'll go through creating modules and team modules in a minute. Creating a folder is exactly what we just did. It's just another way of getting there. And associating modules, again, we'll come to in a moment when we talk about team spaces. The next thing we've got in here is our search. Now, this again is something I'm hoping Zoho makes a change for, because every time I go in here, I go and I search my lead in here. But this search bar isn't to search the CRM, it's just to search your modules list. It's taken me ages to get my head around it. I think you put a search bar up there, and to me, this one stands out more than the search bar on the side. So I'm hoping they make some tweaks here. But that's an easy way to be able to search between your modules. Now, if we go to the bottom, you'll notice we've now got this CRM team space, and I can click the little arrow. You can see we've got a couple of others in here as well. We've got marketing and lead chains. So team spaces are a way of creating effectively custom sidebars for individual teams. So right now within the CRM team space, I can see everything. What we actually want to be able to do sometimes is be able to say, okay, for the marketing team, they only need to be able to see this, this, and this, and be able to break that down. So that's what we're going to do with team spaces. Now, if I go back into our old CRM, this used to be a feature. So actually in the old layout of CRM, if I go into modules and fields, oh, I'm actually not an admin in here, so I can't show you, but if I go into modules and fields in the old CRM, there used to be something called tab groups where you could create custom sort of top bars with different options. That's gone in the new version and replaced with team spaces. So if I go in and manage my team spaces, you can see I've got a couple set up here, but I'm going to create a new one to show you how this works. So let's go into create team space. The first thing I'm going to do is give it a name. So let's say I'm creating a space specifically for the sales team. I'm then going to choose what modules I want to add to this team space. So let's say my sales team, they only need to see leads, contacts, accounts, deals, and I don't know, maybe tasks, meetings, and calls. They don't need any of the other modules. They're all for other things. So I can add just those modules to this team space. I can create folders to organize them. So I can create in here and create a, I don't know, a contacts folder. And I could potentially move my leads and my contacts, or my contacts and my accounts in there. Let's do that now. There we go, pop those all in there. Probably quite badly named as a folder goes, isn't it? Because you're going to get that confused with the contacts module, but that's okay for this experiment. So we've got a contacts folder in there. We then have the rest of our sidebar here. That's absolutely fine. Within this team space, we can then turn on and off reporting and dashboards. So if you don't want the sales team to have access to detailed reports, we can turn that off, but we can keep access to dashboards. So again, just gives you more flexibility around how the system's going to work. Finally, we can choose who the admin for that team space is, and we can also select which users have access to it. So I'm going to add Kirsty in as a user, and I'm going to hit save. When I do that and I go back to the home page, you can now see I've got this brand new team space for sales team. And when I open that up, you'll see I just have the views in there that I want. So this is a really nice way, again, of simplifying the CRM interface and just giving people visibility of what they need to do their particular role. Particularly when you're new to Zoho, it can be a bit overwhelming at times. There's so many options in the system, particularly as they keep adding more. This just makes it easy by cutting out all of the noise and just focusing people on what they actually need to see. So that's team spaces. Now, if I go back up to the top here, because we missed this earlier on, this add module button, this is where we can then quickly add additional modules to that team space. So let's say I actually want my sales team to see invoices. I can add that module. I can put it in a folder if I want, but I'm going to leave it at the top. Hit save, and now they can see invoices. So you can see how quick it is to customize and add things here. Again, so much of what CRM for everybody is from Zoho is a decomplicating of the configuration of Zoho. In some ways, it should make my life easier, I guess, because actually it puts more control in the hands of kind of standard users and gives more flexibility. It's just making sure we do that within a process that fits your business. So we can now see that we've made those changes. I'm just going to check over my notes here just to make sure we have everything in here. So the only other thing we've not covered for this little section I want to cover is hidden away under the little profile picture. So you've now got different modes within the CRM. So I prefer the light mode, but let's say we like a dark mode. We can change it into that dark mode. And I know for some people, this will be their favorite part of the update. Some people love a dark mode. Personally, I prefer the light mode, but you can see you've got the different colors in here. You can also customize your colors as well to exactly what you want them to be. So I can switch between the two different color schemes. If I'm in day mode, it actually highlights more. There's also an automatic mode in there. So nothing here to actually help, but just a little bit of fun to make the CRM slightly more appealing. The final thing I want to cover in this little section is within our settings, I want to go into our general settings and personal settings. One of the things Zoho's done a lot of recently is increase the accessibility options within the system. Now, a lot of people just don't ever look at accessibility because unless you know you need something, you tend not to check it out. But actually, there's some really good settings in here that it's worth having a play around with. Even if you're not someone that typically thinks you're going to use the accessibility settings, it's worth having a poke around in here because there's a lot of options. And critically, these are all per user, like with the color customization a moment ago. Accessibility is just purely for your user, so you can change this to whatever you want it to be, and it won't impact anybody else using the system. Obviously, some of the basic ones in here is we can increase font sizes as you'd expect. But some of the ones I like in here is if I scroll down, we can have strike through disabled buttons. It just makes it far more obvious if I show you when a button isn't available to be used. We've also got, and this is the one that I really like, the show mandatory fields only option. So if I tick this and then I go back into create a record, so let's go into here and go into sales. We're going to create a lead. When I click to create my lead, you'll see I've now got this checkbox at the top, show mandatory fields alone. And when I check that, it removes all of the other fields I don't need to fill in and just shows me the mandatory fields. This has become like such a useful little tool, particularly as I'm working between different client systems. Some systems have loads of required fields, some have less. It's a really easy way to just get everything else out of the way and just focus on what you need to fill in. So hidden in there is a little accessibility tip, but I actually think this should be on for everybody because it's a great little shortcut in there. So that kind of covers navigating the new UI. As you can see, once you're in the modules themselves, once you click into contacts and accounts and leads, the actual module looks pretty similar. But we are now going to get into some of the new data visualization options because this is where it gets really, I think, really exciting in terms of a new update here because so far everything we've spoken about really has been visuals. The next part of this is going to be more about what are the new features that I can utilize and how does it make my life easier using the CRM. So we're going to swipe back across and we'll start in leads. And I'm just going to make sure I've got all of my notes here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to our view records. Now, you'll notice straight away this list is much longer than it used to be. If I switch over into my other user here and show you in here, you can see we've only got like 6 options. In here, we've now got far more. So the first one, and this is actually available in the old layout as well, is our chart view. So our chart view really simply allows us to take all of the data from our module, including based on our custom view. So right now I'm looking at all leads. But if I created a custom view to say just show me leads created this year, which I could do, it would filter the chart view by that. And it then allows me to really quickly create little reports. So right now I'm looking at leads created by source. Let's say I want to see leads by city. Oh, I haven't got that one in there. Let's have a look what else I've got in here. So we have industry, so I can open that up. Oh, you can see most of my leads here don't have an industry. There's just a handful that do. If I scroll down, I can see leads by status. There we go, really quick and easy. It's just a really nice way to be able to visualize your data without having to go into analytics, without having to build a report or anything like that. It's all built in and really quick and easy to get to. Now, This is probably the least exciting one we're going to cover today because the next one's the one we get really good, I think. So moving on, we're going to look at the timeline view. So the timeline view, and we're going to create the timeline view together now. The timeline view allows you to see your records in kind of like a Gantt chart type visualization. This is, I think they've literally been released in the last couple of weeks, this one. And it's really good for being able to visualize where data is in terms of your schedule. So I'm thinking this is going to be used for looking at task ownership. It's going to be used for looking at when your deals open versus when they close. If we look at leads here, I'll show you an example. So let's take our lead created time, and let's also take our, let's say, our last activity time. And if I create that, what it's going to do is very quickly, it's going to create a little bar chart here, or a little Gantt chart, where I can see all of my leads laid out in a timeline. Now, just to make this look a bit better, I'm going to switch into deals because deals works a little bit nicer. I'm going to go into timeline view. And you can see here are my deals. So this is taking my deal start date and my deal close date to lay it out on this timeline graph. Now, by default, it's showing us this in days, but we can look at this in months. We can look at it in quarters, however we want to view the data. But what I really like is how easy it is to adjust things. So I see this being used a lot in terms of forecasting deal closures, because you can very quickly create a view that says, show me all of the deals that are due to close in the next 6 months. You can then see those on a timeline, and very easily you can drag the dates around and update them. If I go right back to the start here, I can also adjust the beginning. Oh, I can't adjust the beginning on this one because this one is done on created time, but if depending on what field I used, you can drag that as well. And you can also color code as well. So right now I'm doing this color coding based on the forecast category. So you can see the one in green is closed, the other ones are in the pipeline. If I click into this one and update it, let's go in and let's say qualified. We're just going to run through the blueprint very quickly. Hit save. Oh, let's just close lost it. There we go. And then we will manually jump to close one. If I now go back into here, what we'll see is that now turn green. So again, I really like this as a way of visualizing things moving forward, because you can start to see that data. And ultimately, I was talking to a client earlier this week, in fact, and they were talking about how they wanted to improve their forecast. And this was the thing that jumped to mind, because they already set their expected closing dates. They already are using their forecast category. What this view allows them to do is look 3 months into the future, what's due to close, and then they can see those different things turning green as they close and as they update. So again, a really nice visual way to use the system. I'm just going to go back into my presentation here because I just wanted to share a couple of photos. These are actually from Zoho. They've given some more sort of pictures and more images of how this would look. So you can see this particular company is using it for deals here. You can see how it looks like on a planned view. But the one that I particularly liked is they're also then using the group by to group by the deal owner. And again, I think it's a really clever way to be able to visualize the individual salesperson's pipeline and get an understanding of what their workload is. We could also do this in the context of tasks. I was thinking of one client in particular. We've got a custom module where they manage orders that get sent to a physical factory to be manufactured. And right now, all of it is looking at numbers, which is great, but it's not very visual. This would be perfect to be able to visualize, okay, what date did we send the order to the factory? What date did we get it back? And again, it just makes it really, really visual in this display. And it's just another built-in way to CRM. It doesn't take a lot of configuration. It doesn't take a lot of setup, but really improves the user experience. If we run across now back into the main screen, we're going to go on to my favorite one now, and we're going to start looking at our grid view. So I'm going to open up grid view. Now, grid view is like an Excel table within your CRM. It's what everyone's asked for forever. It's like using Monday.com or any of those other kind of newer CRM tools. I can go into any line and I can just click into the box. I can change stuff really easily. So if I click into the account, if I click into the name, really simple. If I go into leads, it's even better here because you can see there's so many options in here. So I can go in, I can see the emails, I can see the cities, I can click in there and I can edit. there we go, when it wants me to. Oh, it's not playing ball for a second. But the other thing that I really like is if I select multiple leads and then hit lead source, and let's say I want to set it to cold call, I can then hit proceed and it'll update all of those records in one go. It's so quick and easy, and it just makes life really, really easy to update data. This is my favorite new visual. The other thing we can do is we can also pin columns. So if I go into pin here, I can scroll across, so I can have as many columns as I want in here, and I can really easily scroll across. Previously, if you're looking in the old list view, it got quite overwhelming when you had a lot of data on the screen. This makes it so easy to see what's going on. You can also see I can add a lead directly within here, and it gives us a nice little pop-up, which is great. And the other thing I can do is if I switch back to deals and I go in and I'm in my grid view, I can go to my amount and I can do an aggregate. So if I want to see the total here, I can go into sum, and then at the bottom I get my total. If I want to take my expected revenue and do the sum of that, I can pop that in there as well. So again, a really nice, quick and easy way to get better visuals of your data. Quite frankly, I think this is going to completely replace the built-in list view for me. In every way, this seems to work better. It's easier to edit things. You've got that mass update function built in. You've got the sums. And I'm thinking, if I'm looking at, say, my deals, if I want to see how many deals I've got and what the value of them are, straight away, it's there. I don't need to go into a separate report. I don't need to sit with a calculator or anything crazy like that. It's just all the data's there. Again, these aren't groundbreaking changes in the grand scheme of things, but they're little adjustments that I think are going to make using Zoho CRM so much smoother. And in some ways, being brutal, this is Zoho catching up with some of the features some of its newer competitors have done really well on. But now it's got it, it is huge. And it is making a day-to-day using of the Zoho CRM so much better. So the final one we're going to talk about, and it does get better, I promise you, is we're going to go into the split view. Now, split view is another brand new way of visualizing data. And what it does is it takes, instead of having one big table of data, it splits it into smaller batches. So I'd already set up a split view here, but let's go into leads and create a split view together, and I'll talk you through a little bit more what it means and what you can do with it. So let's go in and create our split view. When we do it, it's going to ask us to create a name. So I'm going to just call this lead source. It's then going to ask us to split by, and we can either split by pick list or user or a criteria. So because we're doing on the lead source, that's just a pick list. So I'm going to go into split by lead source. It's going to automatically pull all the splits out because we've already got those filled in the lead source. We can choose the columns we want to see, but we can customize those later. And we can choose who we share this view with. When I hit save, now I have a really nice, easy way to see, there's my advertisement leads, there's my cold calls, there's my employee referrals, there's my external referrals. Again, in a really nice streamlined view, so I can quickly see all of this data at a glance. And what I particularly like about this is we can create multiple split views. So we just created one for lead source, but we can create another split view if we want. And this time we might do it by, say, well, let's make this a custom split view. And we're going to use a criteria. What this allows us to do is create custom splits. So how this might work is, let's say you've got a couple of different criteria you use to work out whether a lead is a high value or low value lead. So we could go into here and we could set that criteria. So I'm going to put high value. I'm going to go into criteria. I'm going to do country. I'm going to say high value contains United Kingdom because I'm in the UK and that's where most of my clients are. And I'm also going to say, okay, they've got to have an email address. So email address isn't, oh, sorry, let's scroll down, is not empty. So I've created a bit of custom criteria there. So I'm defining anybody as high values, they're in the UK and the email is not empty. So I'm going to hit done on that split. I can then add an additional split. Now you can currently have up to 10 splits, but I expect that will probably expand in the future. We'll see what happens. But for now, I think 10 is probably enough to get everybody started. So we might do low value. And this time we're going to do country doesn't contain United Kingdom, and email is empty. You kind of get the gist. Obviously, you can break this down further. Hit done, hit save, and then we can see our breakdown here. In this case, we haven't really got country in here, so you can see it's a little bit empty. But I really like this as a way to visualize my data. With deals in particular, I think this is going to be really powerful because you can start creating those custom views. If you're a sales manager, it's going to make it really easy to be able to quickly log in the morning and see an overview of the things that you care about instead of having to scroll for a massive list. I think in some ways, all of these new features are actually going to remove some of the needs to use reports because actually a lot of what we did with reports previously was getting access to data that was in the CRM. But now that data is going to be more easily accessible within the CRM itself. I think it's going to mean it's going to take a little bit more for us to need reports. But again, this is another great feature that's going to really add to the usability of the system. Now, the final new thing I want to go through in terms of data visualization is our interactions tab. So let's open up one of our leads here. So previously, if I went into my lead and I went into timeline, you would see this pretty, sometimes useful timeline that showed you every update to that particular lead or contact or account. But it was sometimes quite hard to read. If you've had a lead in the system for 2 years, all sorts of updates could have happened, but it was actually quite difficult to see what interactions have you had with that lead. Well, this is where this new interactions view comes in. And I've obviously picked an awful example here because there's actually no interactions on this lead. So let's very quickly search for a lead with my name. But what this interactions view does is it takes out all of the noise from the timelines view and gives us a much clearer view of interactions. Very helpfully though, I don't seem to have any interactions. Bear with me a moment. There we go. Does this one have any interactions? That's unfortunate. Okay, we'll pull up an example of that in just a moment. It wouldn't be a live demo, would it, without something going slightly wrong? All of my clients on the call will know it is my ongoing joke that everything will work perfectly until you show it off live, and then there's always something. But that's absolutely fine. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But what interaction does at a high level is it takes all of the noise out of your timeline and just pulls out the email communications, the engagements, the follow-ups, and actually it ties really closely to Cadences, the new email communication tool within CRM, to give you a clear view of what is your communication history with this particular contact. Again, we'll go more into that possibly in a separate webinar. I think it might be quite nice to do a webinar specifically on Cadences because Cadences is a really powerful new feature. Came out the second half of last year. And I think very few clients right now are making full use of it. So I expect customer wise and Zoho users in general, it's probably an area we can do more for. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. So I'm going to take a brief break from the actual full webinar now, just because I want to ask the question. Where all of you on this call are obviously paying for Zoho. If you're not paying for Zoho and you're here, I love that you want to spend an hour with me, but maybe use Zoho. Um, but the question is, are you making the most of Zoho? So we're going to do something a little bit different today. And this isn't for our existing clients. They've already got full access to us. It's something for those people that don't currently have a Zoho consultant they're working with and potentially want to look at getting more out of their CRM. So for the first time kind of ever, we've never really done this as a standalone thing. We're going to put together a CRM health check. And it's going to include a couple of parts. And I promise this will only take a couple of minutes and then we'll be back into the main webinar. The idea of the health check is one, to sit down with you for an hour or so and get a feel for how you're currently using Zoho. Work out where there are gaps, work out where there's elements that we could potentially improve. Maybe it's a lack of automation, maybe it's making more use of some of the built-in features. We then want to get access to your Zoho system so we can go in and sort of do a full audit report. And that will involve going through and looking at what fields have you got set up, how are you using reporting, what automations are triggering. Again, are you making the most of your system? All of this is really around helping you get your money's worth out of Zoho. Ultimately, you're already paying the subscription. There's so much in the system, and there's so much that people don't know about. And we wanted to give people a way of being able to very quickly work with us, but also to understand and give you guys a plan of action to how you can make more from Zoho. The final part of this is we'll put together a recommendations walkthrough and sort of a next steps outline, and we'll take you through that. And it's entirely up to you then whether you went away and sort of implemented that yourselves, or whether you wanted to work with us on a longer term basis to help you implement those changes. Now, usually, I'm going to put big usually there, usually we only work with clients on a monthly or an annual basis. This has actually been a thing from right back from when we started. We only have ever done monthly or annual contracts. But because we wanted to do something a little bit different, and if I'm honest, this is a bit of a trial. We've never done something like this before. This webinar might be the only time I ever talk about it, depending on how we go. But because we've put together this healthcare check in kind of a standalone package, and we think there's real value in it, instead of doing the usual £2,000 a month that we do for clients, instead we kind of want to do this as a one-time package of £500 all in. We'll do that review, give you an action plan, and I think there's real value in it. If this is something that you're interested in, scan the QR code, go to that URL. I'll post it in the chat as well. And sign up. Let me know. We'll go through it. We can put together an action plan to make sure you're ready, not only for all the new features in CRM for everybody, but all of the other stuff that's already in the CRM, all the other features, all the other tools are already sitting there. Anyway, let's get back on with the webinar. I told you it would only take a moment. All my clients that are in the chat will know I'm definitely not a salesperson, but I do like using Zoho. So back to it with team modules, and I think we're doing pretty well on time here as well, which is great news. So team modules are a whole new concept within CRM for everybody. Instead of having a module, so if I go in and create a module, we've now got two options. We've got org modules and team modules. Now, previously, all of the modules that we would have created in your CRM, so whether they're custom modules or whether they're built-in system modules, all of those would have been global modules. They would have all been for the whole system. But now we've got this option for team modules. Now, if I'm honest, there's not a huge difference between the two right now, but I can see where Zoho's going with it. And I want to take you through some of those features because there is one in particular that I think does add some benefits to team modules. So we're going to create a team module here. And you can see right at the top, it makes it really obvious it's a team module because it gives it this nice green banner. Now, the idea of a team module is it's going to be a database of data that's owned by a particular team. Now, one of the key things of this is you're able to make someone an admin of the team module without making them an admin of the whole CRM. So where this could be really powerful is where you might say have a marketing department where they want to create a module for managing marketing campaigns or events or something like that. They want to be able to build that module, but you don't want them to have access to the whole CRM to customize whatever they want. You could set up a team module for them, give them admin access to the team module so they can manage that module themselves, but then they don't get access to everything else. So the way Zaho's described this is it's kind of decentralizing the control of the CRM. So if we go in here, we'll put this together. Let's say we want to create a module for design requests. So let's say the marketing department keep receiving design requests and they want to be able to manage those in a better way. So we're going to create a module called design requests. We're going to turn off the image field because we don't need that. We're also going to get rid of all the system information that we don't need. It's a little bit of an insight into how we build modules for our clients. So anything that's like this, we put down into system information so it's out of the way. We don't need an email field, so we're going to get rid of that. We'll remove. We don't need the email opt-outs, we'll get rid of that. The modified by can go down there. Oh, secondary email we'll get rid of, didn't mean to keep that. We'll keep the owner field. We then might add a status field in here. So status, let's say new active and completed. Fix that typo. And we'll enable the color coding in here as well, because who doesn't like the color coding? Put that as blue, orange, green. Perfect. We'll also make that a mandatory field. There we go. And then we'll also add a description in here as well of what the design request is. Pop that in there. Description. Hit required. Hit save. Hit save. So it's now going to ask me what team spaces do I want to add this to. So I'm going to add it to the marketing team space, and I'm going to put it at the top of the marketing team space and hit save. That's going to take a second. And now when I come out of here, I can now go into the marketing team, and you can now see I've got a brand new module for design requests. Now, if I go back into the settings here, or in fact, the other way I can do it is directly from here. I can click on the three little dots. Again, you can see this is where Zoho are kind of really pushing the customization directly from the top level. I can add fields and buttons and all sorts of configurations directly from here. But the thing we're going to look at now is our requester settings. And this is where we can choose who's able to make requests. And this is where we're going to come back to that request module we discussed a moment ago. So the owner's me, we're going to leave that as the case. We can generate a link if we want to directly to be able to make requests. We can also do a QR code. And what this does is it creates a special link. If I slide across into our other user here, I'm just going to switch them into the new version. I'm going to put in this link. And what that does is it takes them to this new sidebar element, My Requests, where they can then log a request for a design. So I'm going to add new request. They're going to put in the request name. So I'm going to do t-shirt design. And we want red and orange. And we're going to say it's a new request. Obviously, if we were doing this properly, we'd probably set that as a default field as well. Hit save. And that's now logged a request. So if I'm now in this other user, I can go down into the My Requests, and I can see they've now logged one design request. Now, if I go into the main system, they haven't actually got access to the design request module. They are only able to request They're only able to request and add records as a request into the design module. They've not got full access. So now me as the marketing team user, I can now refresh this page. And what we should see is I've now got my t-shirt request. And I can now go through and I can process this request. So what it kind of allows us to do is it allows us to give access to specific users to make requests into modules that they don't necessarily have any ownership of. So the kind of places I'm picturing that we're going to use this is one, like the design requests we've just done. So the marketing team are going to own that process. They're the ones that are going to create the designs. They're going to do all of the work there. But you want to be able to send a request in to do that. So it gives that person access to make that request without impacting the overall permission structure of the system. The other ways we've done this, and in fact, I'm looking at setting this up for one client at the moment, is they do a lot of like samples. So if you want to buy something from them, they'll send you a free sample. So a specific department handles samples. So the way it now works is they will create a request for that department to do the sample. They don't have access to do the sample themselves. It's a request for that other person to create the sample. It then goes through to them. Now, what I like about this is this ties into all the other workflows and automations you'd expect from the CRM. So we can have email alerts, we can have workflows, we can have tasks, reminders, all of that kind of stuff that you'd expect. Now, we can also as well, if we want to, we can give everybody access to request in a module. So I've just changed this module setting now to add all users. What this will mean is now going forward, the other users now won't require that special link. Instead, they'll go directly into My Requests, and then they'll be able to log requests directly from here. So it's a really different way of working. And to be honest, it's going to take a little while, I think, to see how this plays out and to see where this fits, because there is overlap to other tools within the system. So previously, to do something like this, you might have used an approval rule, or you might have used a review rule or something like that. So there is some overlap here. I quite like the way this works. I like that it's separate. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how we use this over the next year and how Zoho adds to it as well. One of my concerns is I think this ends up being confusing because you've also got tasks in the system. So how does a task and a request differ? And I think that's going to be one of the things over the next 6 months or so as Zoho continues to refine this to see what changes they make to make this even smoother. So last couple of bits, because we're coming up to our last few minutes here, and I'll make sure to run through any questions as well. So permissions and customization. As I've kept alluding to throughout this whole webinar, is it's now really easy to make customizations. So my big suggestion, if I give one action item from this webinar, it's to go into your user settings, go into profiles and review what profiles you have set up. A lot of people use simply the administrator and the standard profile that's built into Zoho. But what you might not be aware of is, in particular, the standard profile. It gives people a lot of access you might not have known about. So, for example, and this is the one that always slightly scares me, out of the box, the standard user profile can export everything in your system. So if you've not configured your permissions, any standard user can go in and do an export of your entire deals database, your entire contacts database. This is one of those things that I think Zoho should change what these standard permissions are. But certainly now there's going to be more access to make changes to system configurations. I think this is going to be even more critical. You can see as I'm scrolling through here just how many settings are enabled for a standard user. My recommendation and the way I manage this is I will create a new profile and I will call it client name standard user. You can give it a description. And my general recommendation when setting up permissions, start with everything turned off and just add the things you know people need. If you accidentally remove something someone needs, they'll very soon tell you that that's the case and you can add it back in. But I'd much rather take things away and be overly cautious than give too much access and potentially ultimately you never know what someone's going to do with your data. You want to keep it secure. This is one of the big ways of doing it. So that's a key takeaway I think for this is just review your user permissions and just make sure the right people have access to the right things. So final part of this then is some questions. So I'm just running through my question list now. So with this sections, can we then run reports to review, see how accurate the initial close date was, etc., how long it takes to close, forecasted versus actual, how long specific product types take? So that is a good question. That's actually a question from a client as well, so I'm going to have to answer this one whether I like it or not. This particular question is a good question. Now, what I would say to this is I think what we're looking at there is probably still more reporting because you're looking more at making comparisons. That said, what you could do is within the CRM, you can add formula fields that works out the days between two different dates. And then you could do your split based on that formula field. So what we could do is if I go back into deals, let's just run through this very quickly. Where am I going? Sales and deals. So if I go into deals and I create a new split, let's say I have a field that's called, I don't know, days between expected close date and actual close date. I could then do my split and I could split it to say, okay, show me everything that closed on its expected due date, show me everything that closed before the expected due date, and then maybe a separate split for everything 10 days over and anything more over. So depending on what you want to do with that data, you could do it as a split or a report, but it certainly does give you more options now. Okay, I think that's our only main question right now, which is absolutely fine. If anybody else has questions, feel free to post them now. Just for a second, whilst people are doing that, I'll just run through a couple of other things in here. So just scrolling down my notes. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight outside of the redesign. One thing people may not be aware of, and actually is really critical, is the Zoho are discontinuing autoresponders. So if you're currently using CRM web forms specifically and you're using autoresponders, Zoho are actually going to be phasing support of these autoresponders out. So it's actually going to be discontinued the end of September. This is one of those bits of news that's kind of been a little bit hidden. It's not been particularly posted very widely by Zoho. It is on their newsroom, but it's easy to miss things on their newsroom. The main aim here is to move people into Cadences, which is Zoho's new tool for managing email communication. It's much more powerful than what autoresponder was. Autoresponder was essentially let's just send an email. Cadences allows you to do kind of sequence emails. So something that previously you'd have to do in like Zoho marketing automation, you can now do directly in the CRM. This is something to certainly be aware of and make sure if you are using autoresponders, it's something on your roadmap to replace. Obviously, if you need assistance with that, that's something we could potentially help with. So just let us know. The next sort of quick fire thing I have on my list, and there's some really fun ones in here. I love the little updates I have been making recently. If I go into any record and I create in fact, let me open an existing record. If I go down into my notes, we have now got rich text notes. So this is a rich text note, which means I can now go in, I can add bullets, I can go in and do all sorts of things in here. Again, it's only a simple update, but it's one of those things that if you use notes all the time, it's just going to make life so much easier to make visual notes that are really telling. Just one of those simple things that Zoho's added. Going on to something that is a little bit more powerful, I want to talk about our analytics for a second. Now, analytics in the CRM, I felt has always been a little bit too limited to be that useful for most businesses. Pretty much every client I've worked with, I've always pushed them more into the Zoho Analytics standalone app rather than using analytics built into the CRM, purely because I've always felt it's too limited. But Zoho have been doing a load of work recently to improve that. So one of the things you can now do, which I think is huge, is if I create a dashboard here. So let's do a leads dashboard. If I create a chart view of, let's say, my lead statuses or my lead sources, so let's do that. So lead source, I'm going to select my leads to create my report. I'm going to do count of leads and I'm going to do grouping by the source. Again, I'm doing this as rapid fire, but we could do a whole webinar potentially on this because it's quite a big topic, reporting in CRM. So I'm going to create my little report here. So straight away, I can now see my details. I'm going to drag that out. So there we go. Here are my leads by the lead source. Really useful information. Now, the thing that I've always found limiting about this is you would have to then create a filter within the report for date. So I'd go in here and say, okay, let's create a filter by created date and say where the created time is, let's say this month or whatever it is that you would choose. I think it's current month. There we go. So I'd hit that, hit save. And, that all works great. But then what would happen is, come out of that, there we go. Then what would happen is if I'm looking at this on the first of the month, all of a sudden all my reports useless. So I want to tweak that filter. Well, then to edit the filter, I would then need to go back in and edit the report. Now, that's fine if it's one report, but if we're looking at a company with lots of different dashboards, you could have 40, 50 different reports on that one dashboard, and it just became unmanageable. But what you can now do, and I think this is absolutely huge, is we can now go in and go into add a dashboard filter, and we can actually add a filter to the whole dashboard. So I'm going to create a time, hit save. And what that does is I do just need to remove my filter from the individual report, hit save. And now what this means is now whenever I go into this report, so if I go into here, I can go in and say, okay, show me this month, apply. Or I can say, okay, show me this year. And I can really quickly filter the entire dashboards of reports in one click. Again, this is one of those things that is such a huge, it's small in many ways, but it's such a huge improvement. And actually, I think this is going to fundamentally change where I use Zoho Analytics because actually, for a lot of clients, now that CRM has got more of these filtering functionality, this is going to mean actually CRM is enough for a lot of clients. And I think that's going to be really big. And you can see you can even do like specific dates in here. I actually even prefer the date filter on here to how it works in analytics. So I can hit apply. There's nothing on that particular day, unfortunately. But it gives you an idea of how this works. I think, again, this might be something we do as a separate webinar, depending on how the response is today, going through how you build these reports. But it's such a huge improvement. The very final thing I want to bring up, just because I know there's a couple of people on the call that have asked me about it previously, is finally Microsoft Teams is integrated with the phone system in CRM. This has been a really, really long time coming. Zoho promised it a long time ago. It kept getting delayed. It's finally out. I have it working in my live system. So it's just something I want to highlight. If you're using Microsoft Teams as your phone system, that can now be connected to CRM. It means you can call directly from the CRM. It means when people call you, it pops up in the CRM and it can shows you their details in the CRM, and automatically adds calls to the calls module in CRM. A really, really big improvement. And that brings us to 3 o'clock. So I think that really wraps us up. Hopefully this has been helpful. If anyone has any feedback, I'd really appreciate it. It's the first time I've done a webinar, so we'll see what everyone's response is. I'm sure there's some room for improvement, but I appreciate you all hanging out with me for the last hour. I'm definitely going to have a break to have a drink now because I think I've spoken non-stop. But yeah, I appreciate it. Any feedback, anything at all, just let me know. If you are interested in doing the CRM health check, I'll put the details up again. After this, I'll also be sending over the recording to everybody. So if you want to look back, I know we went quite quick over things, you can do. But otherwise, I hope everyone has a great weekend and I will speak to everyone soon. And I'll let you know about the next webinar. Thanks, everybody. Bye.